Okay, we are on. Welcome everyone to today's Power Talk, how to grow your practice with reports. So very exciting topic. We'll jump straight into it, and we'll do some quick introductions, and then we'll get right into the content. So for those who may not have watched before, my name is Damien Adler. I'm one of the co-founders of Power Diary and head of customer success as well. Now, brief backstory: I'm a registered psychologist in Australia, and had a private psychology practice that from many years ago, and realised that there really wasn't any kind of software that was really suitable for for what we were looking to do. And so my brother and I started Power Diary and really grew the platform to really help support practices to be able to grow and operate efficiently. So very, very brief summarized backstory, but this topic is one of my favorite. Data. We've got some interesting things going on with my camera there, Justin. I can see we're
I was noticing that, but it's okay.
Off to a good start.
Definitely.
Let's see if that will. I've wiggled the wires. We'll see if that gets us more.
Yeah.
But this is one of my favorite. Data and being able to understand what's happening in a practice is really critical to sort of decision making and looking at how you sort of operate and where you sort of put your attention and sort of really having your finger on the pulse of what's happening. So we're going to talk about reports, and I know it's one of your favorite topics. Yeah. You talk with customers all the time. I'll throw over to you, and you can introduce yourself, and then we'll jump right in.
Yeah, definitely. So if anyone doesn't know me, my name is Justin. I'm part of the customer success team at Power Diary, and I specifically focus in on sort of larger practices and helping them set up, get onboarded, and get acquainted with Power Diary. And definitely one of the largest things or the biggest points of interest for these larger practices is the reporting and analytics, because they use that all the time. And it's typically why they've grown to the size that they have, where they've got 20, 30 practitioners sort of in the business. And it's because they look at this data and they use it very, very effectively. But that obviously all comes back around to knowing where to go to get it and how to use it to your advantage, which I believe is exactly what we're looking at doing today. Isn't that right?
That is exactly right. It's a very nice, smooth throwback to me there, Justin. Thanks very much for joining. It's really great to have you co-present this with me today. So what we are going to cover is really around how reports are used to sort of take the pulse of your business. We're going to focus in on, there are a whole bunch of reports, right, in Power Diary that you can do. Yeah. And if we were to go through them all, we would be here for a long time. So we're going to focus on a few, key ones just to, make sure that, people know how to kind of use those. But we won't be covering all of them. But anyway, it will give you a really good sort of jump start and some really good sort of tips and tricks and some real world examples about how you can kind of use these reports to make a difference in how you operate your practice and make life essentially a lot easier.
For sure, yes.
The camera looks like, but we will push on. Okay. Yeah. With new client reports. So why don't you walk us through a little bit about what this report is and why you would use it, and then we'll jump in and do a screen share. I think you're going to sort of demonstrate this report. So yeah, what essentially is this report, and why do people love it?
So it gives you a bunch of date ranges that's going to allow you to see new clients that have been entered into the system. So essentially, as the name would suggest, all your new clients. And it's particularly loved for a number of reasons. But one of the key ones is definitely noticing if there's been some sort of drop-off in new clients coming into the practice. So this is something that you can use for very early detection to see. You can kind of compare month to month. So if you pull for this month versus the month before versus the month before that, you can start to spot a trend in seeing if there's been a drop-off in new clients, which is very essential because it starts letting you ask the right questions as to, okay, why is this happening? Is it something to do with my referrals? Is it something to do with maybe our marketing and how we're getting out there? It just it gives you the jumping off point very commonly to start asking the right questions to see where something might be going wrong if that you see those numbers kind of dropping off. And it's what a lot of the accounts will typically, or what a lot of the clients will do is their first port of call, they'll look at this report, and it's something they'll check very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of gives you an advance warning too, doesn't it? Like if often if new referrals coming into the practice have dropped, often it won't be experienced in the calendars or in the schedules for some time. But this sort of really does flag it nice and early. So I'll I think you're going to show some how this actually works. I'm going to stop the presentation here. That all being shown well, you should now be able to share your screen.
Here we go.
And we'll go from there.
All right. You should be seeing the Middle Earth and More Clinic up on the screen now. So that's excellent. All right. So with my very real list of clients here, I'm going to jump in and have a look at the reports down here. So in Power Diary, this is where you're going to go. You're going to jump into sort of your reports. You're going to go across to your clients here. So that's just this one here. And you jump down into new clients. It's a fairly straightforward initial set of filters that you're kind of presented with, the very important start and end date. But then you can drill down a little bit further if we choose to. So typically what I'd recommend doing first is just kind of get a bit of a pulse. So we're going to go and do from January 1st, we'll go with a wider date range before we start having a look at some of these other filters. Now, when we run the report, you can see here, I've just got my 4 clients that have been added in here. You can see a number of different columns. And this is where we can start sort of seeing, obviously, if your practice was only seeing sort of 4 clients come in, that might be something to have a look at. For the purposes of this, though, we're having a look, and we're going to assume this is fairly okay. But you're going to be able to see sort of who the clients are, as well as who they're referred by, which is very important as well. So it's going to let you know if they've been referred by a particular person to your clinic. You're going to be able to see that through here. And you can also see, as a very important thing as well, if they've had a first appointment or not. If they've been added into the system sometime before, because you can see that here. So here it's the 14th of June. That's not too bad that they may not have booked a first appointment, but it's a good also sort of starting off point to go, okay, I may have clients that are registered to my system, but I've never seen them. They haven't actually come in yet. And so that is sort of a starting point in terms of what you'll kind of do first. And then, of course, you can start looking at some of these other filters to start drilling into specific practitioners. Maybe there's something going wrong in the initial consult process. So if you're seeing sort of drop-offs or people not being booked in with particular practitioners, and the same with referrers as well, because something I can do down here is I can kind of have a look and I can see, okay, these are being referred here. If I'm wondering where a certain referrer may have gone, I can do a search on them and I can actually just hone in on particular referrers if that's also something I would like to do as well. But that's sort of the initial jumping off point for what a lot of people will do.
If you want to say reorder, so if we went to that sort of first appointment column there, and we want to sort of order the data by the date range. So if we go across to that little the option there on the right hand side, were to then like a sort by ascending or descending. So we're able to kind of like arrange that to sort of display the content based on any of these fields. Is that right?
That's right. So that's something you can do across all the columns, and it's a good thing you brought it up as well. So if there's a particular way I want to see this information, like maybe I want my practitioners in ascending order or descending order, however I want to do it. But exactly right. And especially if you do it by ascending, it's going to obviously organize it in date value, but it's also going to pull any empty slots to the top of that list as well, as we sort of see happen here.
Yeah, exactly. So if you were trying to filter and want to see, all the new clients that might have come in that in fact haven't had a first appointment yet, then you could do that. And in this way, we've done it using a filter, and you can see that's why that first the first field there is white. We can see it's actually not they haven't had an appointment yet. But the other option that we could do if we want to clear that filter, we could also use the values in there, so we could get rid of that filter to remove it, and then we can then we can also use less than or more than, so we can actually look at if there is null, for instance, in there. And then we can filter, and we can see that there's one client there that has never had that first appointment. So it's a really good way of just checking, and having a look to see if, hey, what is the, have we got clients that are booked in or they've registered one way or the other, perhaps they've rung up, they've put their, they've given their details, I'll call to make an appointment, or I can't do it right now, and then they never have. And so it's an opportunity to sort of really see and pick up on those so we don't get any clients sort of left. The other thing that might be worth us showing on here, if we clear that the null field out, and then we were to drag, for instance, the let's say if we were to drag the default calendar, for instance, into into the header there. So this is and what Justin just did, grab the actual field, so you get the title or the column heading to the header, into the top of that, and then it actually sorts the data, right, based on that particular. That's right. Yeah. So if we do that,
I missed the spot before.
Yeah, but now what you can see, it's actually grouping the data based on that column that you've selected, right? So what's great to see is if you want to see what the breakdown is, like range. My camera's really doing some funny stuff, isn't it? And if you want to see within that, it just adds an extra degree of interest to the to our webinar today.
Exactly. But, will Damien figure out the camera?
Exactly. Do some live tech support here. What we can actually see here is that let's say you want to see how they're being allocated, right? Because this is reflecting who the new clients have been allocated to. And so you don't need to go through each calendar and do one at a time and then you just group it by that because that's what you're interested in. And then you get the totals at the end. And most of the reports have this functionality for a bunch of the fields where you can group and sort and get a count. So we could have done it with the referred by as well. We can slide that into the header and then we'll get it grouped by that. So I think this is something that we probably need to actually make more obvious in the app itself, because I think sometimes people do miss this particular function.
100%. And again, I'm glad you bring this up as well, because yes, you're going to notice that this is going to be a very common theme, using these column filters, using this one here and the group by as well. And yes, I do agree. It's something that a lot of the people that I work with, they really, really love. And exactly as you said before, like when you do something like the default calendar here, it groups it by that, so you can get a nice overview, because there's definitely a time and place to pull in very granularly on something. But oftentimes you want to start broader, and then as you identify things, then start honing in, rather than sitting here going through every single calendar, exactly as you said.
Yeah. And you can actually multi-layer this too. Like we've got a small data set here, make it clear, but you can drag another one up, right? So you could put referred by or something into that, and then it will now break it down into segments and say, of the ones that had referred to this, this particular person, this is who referred them, and group that. And so, for instance, client type is a good way where you might group both. There we go. We'll put that and that. So we can actually see then, okay, this practitioner has received this many new clients of this particular type. So it may be, if they're depending on, this is a customizable field, right? So you can use this wherever you like. Client type, but you see examples where people will put in. Sometimes they might specify if they're child or adolescent, for instance, or an adult or aged, and then by sort of being able to filter like this, you can see whether the clients have been allocated in a way that kind of makes sense and it's not overloading particular conditions with particular types of clients. So there are circumstances where people want to share around a certain type of client, or this allows you to actually see what's happening with that. So really powerful report.
Excellent.
While we're on the screen, just before we jump off, the choose columns, I think we might just click on that here, that there are some, so you can add some additional fields to show. So we don't show all the fields on the initial view because it just gets too cluttered and
it's too much.
It's not necessary, exactly. But you can actually turn on and off particular things. So you could get the state and the and I think
a lot more kind of being added in.
Exactly, and again, this allows, so if you wanted to filter by postcode and see where people are coming from, and if you're getting groups, and clusters coming from certain postcodes, or if you're working across states, you can filter by that and you can see it in whatever format you like. So it's and this is sort of one of the reasons that we want to go through and do this webinar, is because these reports have so much, so many different ways they can be utilized, and the data can be presented in different ways depending on what your need is.
Exactly. And that's the key thing. As I sort of said in the beginning, it's how you know how you can twist the data. It's knowing where it is and then knowing how to twist it to use it to your advantage. Exactly.
Okay.
All right.
I'm
Let me stop sharing because I think we'll there we go.
jumping
I think I'll throw back
exactly
to you.
back to here. So we'll move on to our next one. We do have a lot of reports to go through today. So client retention reports. So this shows how many appointments, right, a client's had in a sort of episode of care. So why does this one have such appeal? Because we know this report gets used a lot, right?
Yeah.
What would you say about this?
Well, I think it's the other side of the coin to the new clients report, right? So new clients are obviously important. You need them to keep coming into the clinic. But then the next thing that's important is retaining those clients and keeping them, both because that's beneficial for the practice itself, but also beneficial to the client, ensuring they're getting the adequate care and the right care that they need. And that's going to be reflected if they're staying on for the number of sessions they should be seeing. And so something that is also looked at religiously is this retention report. The key things it'll do is it's going to give you sort of your averages. So how often, based on sort of a time period you put in, it's going to give you sort of the information around how many sessions does someone typically have. So you'll have a breakdown of sort of everything individually, but the key one is the overall average. And that's the first thing that gets looked at before we look at any other aspects of like the, I guess, the more intricacies of that report. It's that average sort of appointment or session of care, because that is going to tell you if there's potentially a bigger problem brewing. And exactly as you've kind of stated before, or as we've kind of said, it's an early warning, because those signs will start showing early, but the effects of them may not be felt for a while. So the early you can notice something, the better. And sometimes that comes down to just like there's something happening in the initial consultation process, the initial appointment, for whatever reason, something in that process isn't sticking.
Exactly. And this is where I think, yeah, absolutely. Like for practices, and you know, being in the situation myself where you know, my wife and I grew a private, like a group, you know, private practice for a psychology practice. That when you're providing supervision and you're having discussions with you know, team members about data and about, you know, performance, having data in front of you really helps shape the conversation, because sometimes you can get a bit of a feeling, intuitive feeling, that someone might be having difficulty with engaging clients, retaining clients, and so forth. But if you launch into a conversation about that without any data, it's very, very difficult to sort of really get anywhere, because you know, you're talking to another, you know, professional, you're encouraging them to reflect, and you want to talk about what you're observing, but without any data, it does make it more difficult. So the great thing about the retention report is that you can, you know, get data that looks at, you know, how long someone is a patient is, how many sessions they're having. Now that in itself, there could be all sorts of reasons for variance. So if someone has a very low number of average sessions with a clinician, so let's say the average might be in the clinic 7 sessions or something, and someone, you know, is averaging 3, that in itself, you can't draw anything by itself, but it does give you a jumping off point to have a conversation and explore further. So and what you're sort of looking for is, as you were talking about before, is that maybe the person is having difficulty with that early engagement, right? So there might be something happening at the very start, which means that people often having 1 or 2 sessions and then disengaging from that practitioner. And by seeing the data and seeing the difference, then you're able to say, hey, we're noticing this data. Let's have a conversation about why that might. So if it's something that is impacting from or something from I guess a skill development point of view, an engagement point of view, you can work on that skill. Alternatively, it could be something like maybe the person has flagged they're going on, let's say someone might be going on maternity leave, for instance, and knows that in 6 months they'll be finishing up. So they're likely winding down their existing caseload. And if they have any availability to see clients, it might be clients that already known that they're going to be short term. So they might be coming in for 1 or 2 sessions for something, and that's known at the start. So in that case, if the data showed that they had short number, you know, of sessions on average, that wouldn't be a problem, because there's a context to it, and we understand, okay, That's why that is. It's not due to an issue in terms of engagement. So the report itself doesn't tell you the reason, but it's so helpful in terms of having the conversation and just seeing what is actually, what is happening, in a way that you can evidence. So I'm going to stop this so you can see.
Go for it.
I'm going to show us stuff on this. I'll stop that. You should now be able to.
All right. Let me get that up. And just as I get this up, I cannot second what you said enough. These reports are not the end all and be all where like what you see is you should take at face value, but they are so pivotal in starting conversations, starting questions, or looking into the right areas. They're so pivotal in that. All right. Retention report. Let's jump in. So underneath client, so we're going back into the client section and we're jumping down to client retention. So the important thing about how this report works, just so you've got an understanding of it, it does kind of go over it in the top here, but it is worth explaining. The purpose and what it's going to do is it is going to look for clients who have had their first and last appointment within the date range that we set. Mm-hmm. So they don't have anything in the future booked in. So we're trying to get an idea of maybe, I don't know how we've done since January 1st. Let's have a look at that, shall we? So essentially what the system's going to do in a second is it's going to look for, are there clients in these date ranges who had their first and last appointment? And as it turns out, there's quite a few. So this is initially what the report is going to show. So you can see you've got very top level sort of information. But the key thing you'll probably want to jump to first is, okay, across all my practitioners, this is our average number of appointments. Now that might be very good. That might be cause for concern. And so if we're having a look at sort of that, and let's say like that's not great. I typically do want to see at least 6 or 7.
Depending on the nature of the practice, of course, and what they specialize in. Yeah.
Exactly, because everyone's different. So what we're going to pretend is that in my case, looking at my clinic, I want 7. So I'm trying to understand what's going on. I would like to be seeing around 7 sessions. So I can, as always, I can go through each calendar, but typically what's very important, if I'm wanting to see, okay, is it a certain practitioner, like where I'm seeing a lot of 2s and 1s, okay, what's sort of going on? I can use my grouping, which we've talked about before. And I can click on that, and immediately now I've kind of got this grouping set up so I can kind of get a sense of the different clients that fall into this category. And as I expand them, I can start eyeballing things. So I can kind of go, okay, all right, in the case of Jane, I'm seeing a lot of 1s and 2s. Okay. Mm-hmm. And in the case of John, okay, that he's got some really long outstanding ones, but there are some, okay, we might come back to John. Let's hone in on Jane and let's see what's kind of going on with Jane. So now I'll use this filter and I'll say, okay, show me Jane's results specifically. And now we can kind of see sort of the average that's sort of going on with Jane for the time period that I put on. And I can start identifying, okay, all right, that might be worth having a look at and kind of getting a better idea of sort of what might be happening here, because Jane's sitting at around 2.5 sessions, which is a little interesting. And that kind of is a very common workflow I'll often see. It's starting, again, just kind of starting back out, broadly speaking, looking at the average, and then using this grouping of the calendar to kind of start going, okay, we'll start with the practitioners and see how they're doing, and kind of just eyeballing to see, okay, this is where I'm seeing the most amount of 1s, and then honing in on that specifically.
Yeah.
So that's very commonly how that'll be used.
Yeah, perfect. That's good. And I think that the point to make with this too, when I know you touched on it before, as my camera flashes on and off continually.
That's okay.
Apologies. For that.
You're doing amazing.
Just kind of have to keep on. But it's important to understand that what the data it's actually looking at. It is looking at people that have had their first appointment within that and their last appointment within that date range. And the reason that's important to understand is that until the patient effectively has concluded their care and doesn't have any more appointments booked, then we don't actually know how many sessions that patient would have, right?
Exactly.
So we can't put them into the calculation at that point because we don't know what the final appointment is. So this is showing you where the treatment has been concluded based on the logic that they have had sessions within that time and that there aren't any further ones booked. Now, occasionally there will be someone in here that really is due to have another appointment booked and they just haven't contacted. You'll sometimes get data picked up in that, but still, it's still relevant in a sense because right now they don't have another appointment booked. If nothing else happens, no intervention taken, that client is
That's
essentially
it.
finished, right? So it's better, to have it utilizing that kind of framework or that logic to deliver that. So, all right.
Exactly. And that's a fair point as well. As you mentioned that, like someone may just be due for the next appointment or they may need something else booked in. And that's again where you can use the ability to filter by ascending or descending order. So I can see my most recent ones to maybe identify those people. Maybe if they've had something in the last month or two. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And it's good. And I've had circumstances, in, managing our practice where this report has allowed me to have really good conversations with clinicians where I was concerned, honestly about their performance, because we would see, when I do the new client report we did before, I could see that they would be getting a whole bunch of new clients referred to them. And then they would be also saying my calendar is empty. Like I don't have enough appointments in my calendar. And you're thinking, hang on, that doesn't reconcile, right? Because they're getting lots of new clients. Yet when you look at the calendar, everyone else might be booked up, but this person, it's happened a few times where they've got these gaps, and you just intuitively know that, hang on, there's something doesn't feel right about that. So you look at the new client. The next thing then is looking at the actual this retention, and then when you see in some of these cases, what we're able to see is that the retention of clients was really it was low, really below the average. We'd operated our clinic for a long time, and we knew what the data should look like, and this was anomaly. And then that conversation, instead of it being almost the risk of it being a critical conversation to say, oh, hey, we're sending all these new clients, what's going on, how come you're not which would not be a very healthy way of engaging.
No.
Is say, hey, look, looking at this is what the data is saying. Let's have a conversation about why and where, what's happening with this. And because practitioners are generally reflective and generally want to improve their practice. When there's data there, you have that kind of conversation. It's collaborative exploration of.
Yeah.
And in those cases, we found that there were just some things around the initial. Is that very classic example of those initial couple of sessions. A few things around that are important to engagement. So outlining exactly what treatment might look like and checking in with the person. Some of that needed a bit of polish. Once we solved those things, which were only triggered by the data, then in both the cases that were really clear examples of this, they went on and just absolutely soared. They became absolute outstanding. But it all
so good
that on just that identifying what was happening, and then the interventions really targeted, collaborative. It's a positive experience for all, and away we go. So it's
100%.
Not just data in the system, but actually can utilize it in a way that makes everyone's life a lot easier and makes it healthier. Okay,
100%. All right, let me jump back out for a second.
And let's jump into this next one here. Now we're going to look at this financial report.
Oh, it's a big one. It's a big one.
There's a whole bunch of things we could do here, but we're looking at invoices and payments, right? Sales, aged receivables, and also activity summary. Now, why is this important? This one might be self-explanatory, but let's do it. What are people saying, Justin, about this?
Oh yeah, no, this is all right. So look, honestly, obviously the financials coming in is the lifeblood of everything. So ensuring you're on top of that, things are not going well past due. People haven't paid an invoice in 3 months, like things like that is going to actively hurt you. And obviously we want to provide the best care we can, but also you need to grow your practice, and that allows you to do that further. The key way to do that is to understand where the debts are, whether you're up to date, and being able to use that information effectively, which is why I said it was a big one, because we have a number of reports and they all assist in that from different aspects, from, like you said, accounts receivable. Then you get a very big overview of your sort of like where the debt's coming from, as well as ones that let you hone in on sort of more the services being provided as well. It also gives you very actionable data around sort of what services, depending on the reports you're looking at, what services people are coming in for, why they're coming in for it, which ones are your biggest ones that are sort of drawing people in and being utilized, and also maybe giving you options to look at sort of services that maybe aren't having as many people come through. There's a lot. I could probably talk about the reasons for it a lot, but
let's jump in and we'll jump in and have a look at some. I'll stop this so you can go back and do your screen.
Let's go.
And,
all right,
and then we'll jump in.
Let's start with because it's a big one. Let's start with a nice and simple one first. So we're back in the clinic again, and we're going to jump into reports, go to financial, and we're going to start with the aged receivables report. This is unlike some of the other ones we've done. Thankfully, this one is to start us off with the financial section. This one's very straightforward. It has a very simple purpose, and it's something that, again, is used very frequently. Again, giving you that very broad view that then you can hone in on if you're noticing particular issues or particular people that are very outstanding in their debt. It is going to give you who is owing and how old that debt is, kind of broken down into 30-day increments until you hit 90 days when it's kind of 90 plus, as well as giving you those totals so you can get a real sense of, okay, this is how much sort of financials I'm missing. This is what this is how much I should have that I don't have. And it is a very, very good one to be checking because it does, again, kind of honing in on that idea of early detection. You don't want debts going out into the 90 plus days. That's not something you want. If you're kind of checking this frequently, it's going to allow you to catch something when it's here or here before it starts progressing a lot older, because the older a debt gets, the harder it can be to actually recoup that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other element to this too is around, depending on the nature of the practice and what the composition of clients are, but if you're providing services to where companies are paying for services a lot, or insurance providers, compensation schemes, things like that, they'll often have a longer period. So instead of getting paid on the day by the patient, a longer period before that money actually sort of hits your account. And it's quite important from a cash flow point of view, because you need money constantly sort of coming in, right, to the practice. Because typically all your other expenses, particularly salary and expenses, are that's fortnightly typically. And so very often there's a scenario where if too many of the customers are paying in that kind of 31 to 30 plus days, sometimes a couple of months. But you're having to come up with to pay for the service, pay the clinician, and stuff. That causes an issue, and at least being aware of that is important. And for instance, one of the things, there's lots of different ways that you can kind of manage that. But in our practice, one of the things that we would do is that if someone was likely to be a long, so take a long time to pay, we would charge more. For that. It wouldn't be officially on our thing, but when we would look at what their billing cycle was and what would be involved in that, we would build that cost in to the contract that we would organize with them, because it's a genuine cost. We have to carry that debt essentially and pay clinicians for it prior to receiving that money. So that's not going to be a solution for everyone, but at least having the data to see if you find that, hey, we're a busy practice, but the bank account's empty, right? Right? Because that can happen. You can have on paper, a profitable practice and wonder why the account's empty, right? And this is often the answer, is because what money's outstanding and, what the time frame is. So awesome report. Now we're going to go into a bunch of other ones, right? For where we're looking at financial. So let's move on to the next.
All right, so let's have a look at, we'll run over the activity one, because that one, there's a lot in it, but its purpose, again, is fairly straightforward. There's some extra things you can get from it, but it's really when we get into, as a peak, the invoices and payments and the sales reports, where we'll be doing a little bit more of digging. So the activity summary, in the simplest way I can put it, is usually something that is best used for end of day, end of week, I'd say at most reconciliation, because this report gives you a lot of information. You have a number of filters, so you can kind of cut back on that a bit. But what it's going to give you at a glance, if I pull this in, there we go, I don't have too much in here, thankfully, is I'm going to get sort of my list of appointments very quickly. So I'm going to be able to see, okay, so this is how much has been invoiced. Okay, this is how much has been paid. I've got some payments missing. I can kind of start thinking about that. I'm also going to be able to see sort of the payments and where they've come from, but I also have access to sort of the payment reconciliation. So end of day banking, that's important. And it kind of splits it out into my different payment methods through here. It's a snapshot. Above everything else, it's kind of like a snapshot. It's why I say it's best for end of day, end of week at most, because this loads out all that information. And it's just a really nice way to quickly get a snapshot. Okay, how do we do today? How do we do this week? I can get some very quick information without needing to fiddle around with too many bits and pieces. But as always, if I notice something in here, I do have the ability to filter in by calendar if I want to just have a look at Aragorn, for example, and see what he's been doing, just to kind of get an idea. Okay, that's where 2 of my payments are missing. I wonder why that is. And I can keep kind of drilling down from there. So and that's where this comes in.
And I think one of the things, too, if you can clear Aragon for a second to demonstrate something else, this is where what you can see here is this will tell you appointments, whether or not they've been invoiced, right? So these are all appointments that occurred during, say, for instance, that day. Now, we can see here in this example that there's an invoice missing there for an appointment there that is for Mary. Now, in this case, okay, it's because it was rescheduled, so you can validate that and say that's fine. As in we would expect it not to have an invoice. But let's imagine that appointment had been completed, but there was no service attached to it, right? No invoice, which means no service, right? This gives you a way to get an overview of the day, and you can obviously filter it however you want, but you can see if something has gone amiss. So, okay, these are all appointments. Do they all have services? Yes. If they have they all been invoiced and have they been paid, right? And so if you can actually check over that and say, this person hasn't had a service attached, and therefore we need to add a service in. Otherwise, they're not going to show up anywhere else as being an appointment that has not been had a service attached. So that way, it allows you to kind of do a very quick, overview. And then, in addition to that, if we scroll down, this here with we'll see here like sales without appointments. So this again will show you if someone walked in and bought a book or something else that you sell.
Exactly,
it will be there. In this example here, we don't. But you'll see payments, right? So this here will show all the payments that were received, but it'll also show if there were payments that were received for appointments outside of that range. So this is looking at all payments that were received today. And it might be that someone walked in and paid an invoice, or they did it online, paid an invoice from 2 months ago. That's going to pick up on here and say, this person went online, maybe you sent out that, you sent out a debt collection, email with a link to the invoice. Now you can send it out, has a link to the invoice, they click on it and they pay it, right? So that's going to come through. This will actually show you that this payment came in today. It's to do with an appointment some time ago. So it really is, very powerful. So if people aren't using this, have a look at everything that you need to know about what's happened in any particular date range. That's good. All right, let's jump on to the next one.
All right, let's go invoices and payments. This one is a beefy one, but it is one of my favorites because there's a lot you can do with it. So there's a lot of information on this one. But again, that's there because you can manipulate this in a lot of different ways to kind of get a gauge on something. So you have a lot of filtering options off the bat. This is very much focused on sort of the invoices and also obviously the payments attached to them. So that's where this is going to really focus, hence the name, invoices and payments. Very nice and straightforward there. Now you've got your date ranges. You've got the options to hide sort of $0 invoices if that's not something you want to see. But you can also search on invoice date and payment date, again, touching on the idea that someone may have paid for something maybe a month after the invoice happened. So if you want to kind of check, you can obviously filter that by payment date instead of the invoice because that invoice might be a month old, something like that. And if we're filtering by that, I may not get that in my report. And very similar, again, you've got the ability to filter by calendars. You can even do it by sales too. So all this means is that was it the client paying for themselves? Was it a third party? And I can actually get very specific with that if I want to. Same with my appointment locations, and then my capability to choose what types of invoices I actually want to see. Do I want to see all of my paid and unpaid together? Do I only want paid? Do I only want unpaid? And I can kind of mess around with that there. Now, if we kind of just pull some dummy data from here, so if we pull that through, this is going to give you a sense of the type of information that you are going to be able to see sort of in this report. And as you can see, there's a lot. Not only that, there is a lot you can include in the columns themselves. So there's a lot I can choose to take out or add in. And so there is a lot to see, but there's a lot of things you can do here just to try and help things out. So currently I'm filtering by paid and unpaid invoices. I can make my life easier if I just want to see my unpaid ones, for example. So I'm like, okay, for this date range, I just want to see what I've got unpaid. And I kind of move that around like that. Now I can also do a few things as well, and this can help where maybe I go, okay, unpaid invoices only. And then I want to know, if I grab my calendar here, if I'll drag that in, I want to see, okay, how many unpaid invoices are registered against each person and what are they? And so that way I can kind of drill in and have a bit of a look there as well. And it's important to note that it is going to take, when it is basically looking for any unpaid invoices, it is looking for any invoice that is not fully paid. And so that is something that is going to be very useful, because it means even if someone's maybe half paid or something, you're not missing any invoices just because it has an amount on it.
And what I like with that there, that the view we just had too, was that you know, you can see there, if we go to that first one with Peter Parker, I think, who made it to Middle Earth.
That's why it's and more. All right, Middle Earth and more.
We can see here, and this I'm sure practice managers, practice owners, clinicians will relate to this. That you can see in here, we've got one client who's featuring fairly strongly in this. You know. And so we can see a bunch of entries are the same. We can even filter by that if we want. But there we go. We can see a count there that Mary, right? So sometimes there are clients where something has gone wrong with their billing. So maybe we've got some sort of approval, but it hasn't really gone through, or, you know, so when, you know, we're forgetting to invoice or to chase them because we think someone else is, you know, paying, but yet, you know, time has gone on. Sometimes this happens, right? And it's a really good opportunity to kind of be able to do a bit of a sense check and have a look and think, okay, what's happening, you know, and seeing if anything's got clients with, you know, significant due or large number of, you know, volumes that are there. The other thing too, if we just go back, if we clear that and just go back to the filter, this here for, you know, invoices and payments, this is, we can clear that calendar too and just scroll up so we can see it. So depending on the type of accounting that your practice manager, you know, that you operate for your business, I should say, that's where that invoice date or payment date becomes relevant too in that top filter. So if your accounting, and your accountant will know this, but if you're working on accrual versus cash accounting, it will have an impact on whether you count like a sale from a tax point of view as the date the invoice is generated, so when that service was provided, or if you're working on a cash basis, then that kind of sale is based on when you actually received, you know, payment for that. And so being able to filter and swap between, look, am I interested when I'm looking at my financial data from an accounting point of view in terms of the invoice, or am I actually most interested in what I've been paid in that sort of period of time? And that's an important distinction that you'll see. And if it all sounds gobbledygook, what I just said, your accountant or bookkeeper will know, you know, what the relevance of that is. All right, let's into because I'm mindful of the time. Lovely reports.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I think what I'll do, I'm just going to quickly fly through. There's not much else to really worry about. Sort of with the sales one, we can kind of just give you an idea of why you might go here very quickly. So very similar filters you're looking at on this one. So if I just pull some data just very quickly to give you that one, some things that are included in this one that might be relevant to you that you would be interested in, it's more focused on the services themselves. And you do get things such as the time and sort of quantities, as well as another sort of column that you are able to bring in through here as well. So especially if you pay based on time or something along those lines, this is obviously giving me a general view. Filter it by my calendar so I can get a sense of how much time has been done.
If you put the item into, if you drag that item column into the header, and we grouped by that, that's going to tell us the total amount of time and the total amount of revenue that was generated within that date range for each of those services. So, I mean, this is really powerful intelligence in terms of looking at what is bringing in the money at your practice and what is the time that's been spent those particular services, and you know, it's good. Like we'll sometimes see things that you can pick up on here. For instance, is if you're service types, if you have concession service types that are that you identify, and then you run a report like this, you can see whether the proportion of concession service types is what you would expect, given the nature of your practice. So sometimes they can creep up, right? So someone could be on concession at the start of treatment for some reason, and 2 years later, they're still receiving treatment. Their circumstances might have changed, but it's never been reevaluated. They're still getting concession. They've now since been re-employed in a high-earning job, yet they're still on concession, and they really don't need to be, right? So this allows you to kind of detect if there are these sort of distortions occurring in that over time, and then you can say, well, why are we providing so many concessions? It points to, okay, now I need to drill down and understand that, and it can make a massive difference in terms of the economic, how the financial performance of the practice by being able to make sure that things like this are being checked on and just make sense, to you as a clinician or a practice owner or practice manager, whatever your role might be. So,
100%. No, I think that's perfect. And I think I'll stop sharing my screen because I think we'll get you to introduce us to the next section. But we did make it through the financials, which is the big one, but it is so vital. So it's worth spending the time.
Exactly. There's lots of things to explore in there too. Obviously, we don't have time in 1 hour to go through it all, but we want to just, I guess, give you a taste of some of the things that really can be done, and then you can explore. And of course, our customer team are there, live chat. They're
always
there. You can email in tickets. You can jump in the app and click on help. We're always there. So there we go. So what we'll jump onto now is this referrers report, which, believe it or not, I have clicked on, but it's not actually updating on the webinar.
Nice.
This is our
there we go. Okay, it came through. We got it.
We got it there. Okay. Okay. So referrers report. It's going to show referrer activity, and it's going to really help you identify who your. It really is testing us today. It's now moved to statistics. There we go. Okay. It's going to show you about what's happening with referrers. So what I'll do is I'll stop the presentation, and you can actually jump in and show how that actually operates.
Yeah, because we've got 2 referrer reports, and both of them they're fairly straightforward, these particular ones, because they want to serve a singular purpose in each of these. So you have got your I'm going to set up. I don't know why. If we go into sort of the system here, you're going to see recent referrals, and inactive referrers. So recent referrals can be a good way to kind of understand referrals that are coming through, but we're going to jump into the inactive ones just to get things started. Again, this one's, as I mentioned, it's simple. You've just got a date range, which is all you really need for the purpose of this particular report. And it's really going to show you any referrers that may have dropped off. So you can see I've got a series of referrers through here that the system is picking up that they haven't referred anyone in what is a 6-month period. And if I may be asking questions as to why, and I can kind of even see who their last client was, and I can see the date of their last referral as well to see how long ago that's actually slipped. So I'm not just going to get the information of, oh, well, they haven't just made a referral within this 6 months. I'm also getting, okay, well, it's actually been a lot longer than this 6 months since they've actually made a referral, which is something that for me would start posing the question of why is that? Is something wrong with the relationship? Is there possibly a new clinic that's opened up or something like that? I'd start asking questions. And again, it's early detection and trying to understand what's going on. And ask those questions.
It's also showing the last client there. And this obviously is a restricted report, so it's not, but the last client is showing there so that sometimes one of the issues that, a referrer stops referring is something went wrong with a referral. And this allows you an opportunity to kind of look at that and to hone in and see, because it's possible they referred someone, the client disengaged, maybe they had a negative experience, something happened. So it does allow you a starting point to see, why that might be. The other thing that we haven't talked about on the previous reports, but you'll see there's this option to print or to export to Excel and PDF.
Good point.
So this here, and the relevance of this is that you can click on Excel, and that's going to generate an Excel spreadsheet with the details of of this table into Excel. And the reason that might be useful is you might decide that you're going to send maybe a letter or do something to all those referrers to re-engage them, for instance. So once every 6 months you might go, okay, we're going to send out a re-engagement letter to those referrers. So that allows you to actually mail merge software, or you're doing, you want to get that data out and use, whatever you might be using for your normal, for sending out stuff like that. You can get it into Excel, and then you can send out bulk number of letters to all those people to sort of re-engage them.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think that's all we'll focus on this one, because I think it is fairly straightforward. But again, it's early detections and science, and it's why, again, the thing that we will stress is that this is the start asking questions and looking into things, because even from the referrals, there's a multitude of reasons as to why referrers may not be sending things back your way, but it's such a valuable place to start looking.
Yeah.
And what we'll have a look in here is we're going to have a look at recent referrals. So this is, again, fairly straightforward. We do have a couple more options by design, just so that you can drill into certain bits of information a little bit more. A key one that you can turn on is new referrers only. So if you want to kind of identify that there's been whether there's been someone new that you've never kind of come across, they've referred someone to you within the last sort of 6 months, and it's the first time they've referred. So you can identify them, so that if you kind of see that it's worth in maintaining that relationship and putting effort in, you can detect early if it's new referrers only. You can see, oh, they've actually sent 2 or 3 people, and we haven't really engaged with them much. Like, it might be worth kind of touching base and kind of like fostering that relationship. But on top of that, I've got a few options in here, but I might send this out a little bit further just to see if I can pull in a little bit more than that. So if we start pulling this in here, there we go. That gives me a little bit more. Another key thing with this report as well, if I don't do new referrers only, is that I'm going to also see how much I've actually billed the clients that have been referred. So that can be a couple of things that I can use for that. So one, I can obviously identify who my key referrers are that I want to maintain the relationship with. But 2 as well, it's also going to let me know, again, as an early warning detection, if I'm seeing a couple of low numbers in here, and I'm seeing that maybe that indicates that there's less sessions that have taken place, especially if the client was entered in a fair while ago. And it might be, again, another jumping off point into looking at other things.
And if you were to drag that referrer name into the header there, you would get a grouping, right, of that total.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, into that.
Absolutely.
So you can actually see the total build broken down by that particular referrer. So, I think when it comes Christmas time, and you're thinking about like sending out thank you, you shouldn't wait just to Christmas, but if you are sending out cards thanking people for their support, important to make sure that you're not missing any important referrers 100%. That are having a direct impact financially on your business. What we'll do, let's jump in, and we'll continue while we've got this, rather than going back to the presentation.
Okay. Just from a
speed point of view. Let's jump into some and jump into our statistics report next.
All right.
So we can actually see a little bit about how this works, and it will just allow us to kind of go through a few fairly efficiently. So let's run.
Yeah, let's go.
We'll run that report there, and this is sort of gives you. And I think we've got client status at the moment. I've turned on for that, but yeah, there we go. So we can actually see here some overall sort of statistics about gender, age, so forth, and get a sense of what the statistics are for this.
Exactly.
Overall, and you can use you can date created. So if you want to filter this, you can actually use the created date to put in some filter ranges or to change it. So it allows you to get a breakdown of the demographics, particularly if you're interested in things like the what the male, female, or other, what the gender breakdown is of
course.
Then it allows you to actually sort of go through and filter via that, and
exactly.
it gives you a kind of a breakdown of who you're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. Who you're seeing. And again, just with when you do run it, you may find that the client status is on by default, because one of the other important things, which is a customizable field, and a couple of these reports we'll be getting into are a bit like that, where they're things you can actually add into the system. One of those is the status, because what you may be tracking is not only do you want to know whether you've got active clients and things like that as well, you want to know clients that were closed and they achieved their goals, clients that were closed and goals not achieved. But it can also give you some insights into maybe people that have been missed, people entered into the system. I've got a whole bunch of not assigned in here for some reason when I would really want to be adding in the status of that particular client. So just a little quick extra things you may find useful. But yeah, what have we got next?
I was going to say, while we're on that, just briefly to mention, is that with gender too, you'll see we've got in at the moment that's developed is a more fields in relation to gender and sex. So yeah, we've actually got in development some. At the moment, you can customize that to match sort of the identification of the third identification of the patient, but there is a bunch of new stuff that will be rolled out.
It's quite extensive, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It has that, and so that will actually make it through into this this report as well to allow better filter. At the moment, you can still customize it, but this will be a new level of being able to specify more flexible sort of options to reflect people's how they identify. So this is
exactly.
People will see that in their accounts already. Submit's coming, and it's a good addition.
Definitely, 100%. Couldn't agree more. All right, what do we have next? Because I think you got the notes in front of you.
Indeed. We'll go to classification. So let's have a
classification. Let's go. All right. So, anything you want to mention about this from your end?
Yeah, this is mainly allows you classifications allow you they're customizable fields, so you can set them up to whatever sort of makes sense. So sometimes people will use them to look at cultural and country of origin, things like that. So sometimes that's required for reporting to government departments or to meet funding requirements and so forth. Other times it might be based on diagnostic factors. So people might want to identify which clients belong to certain classifications, so that, for instance, if you're wanting to look at a breakdown of or develop a communication that's going to go out to a certain group of clients, depending on how they're classified, this allows you to actually filter and identify those clients. So just another way of giving you kind of flexibility in terms of how you I guess store and classify and are able to then report on clients within your account.
100%. And you can mix and match these as well. You can, and they are, again, as mentioned, a customizable thing. So these are the couple that I've entered into my demo, but I've seen people that have 40, 50 different classifications depending on what they want to track. So you can really customize it to something that that's going to be meaningful to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The last couple of things that we've got here to go through before we finish up, and we will come in pretty much on time, is the session pack expiries. I think would be a nice one to show. So if we go to the session packs, for those who might not already be using them, allows you to set up packages of services that are based on sessions. It can be
a budget amount or an amount of funding.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then it tracks and counts that down. So what we can see here, if we look at this example, it sort of shows you where someone is up to in their packs and which ones might be expired or closing. And so you can actually use this to really identify packs that either have expired or expiring soon, and then address that so that you get a new referral done if needed, or you can make sure that whatever is required, to at the end of that, period of sessions has been done. So sometimes it's about providing feedback to referrers. Sometimes it's about seeking new funding, whatever it might be. But this sort of allows you an overview to see what's actually happening and where people are up to in their packs.
100%. And one of the things that'll often happen as well that'll be used is that you do have this left column sitting over here on underneath the sessions overall column. I don't know how to explain that better, but if I hover underneath this one here and I go show rows where it's less than 2, often what larger accounts will do, or the ones that I work with, is that I click that and I'll click on my little filter and I'll change it to make sure that I'm indicating it's less than 2, because I want to get in touch with somebody before they use their last session. I want to let them know, hey, you're coming up on that last session. If I want to do that en masse, I want to get a bulk look at that. This is a great way to do it because it gives me the list of people, hey, these who I need to reach out for. Otherwise, they're going to run out. And then it's going to be however long until they get the referral and however long until they may come back if it's a case like that. And so again, it's just being as efficient as you possibly can.
Very good. Last one we will look at before we finish up is the client sources report.
Very nice. Very good one.
We'll finish on this one. We might need to expand that date range probably a bit to pick up the data.
Probably, yes.
Yeah. So client sources, you can define and set up the client sources in your account to say where your clients are coming from. So this is where if clients weren't necessarily coming from referral sources like another practitioner or a GP and so forth, this allows you to essentially see and capture data about where clients are hearing about you. So if you're doing any kind of marketing, advertising, and so forth, what you can do is when customers come in or when new patients come in, you can ask them where they heard about you. That gets entered into the system, and this allows you to generate a report based on that. And then of course you can see the total amount billed based on a particular source. So you can filter it and say, all right, I want to see how much, if I'm advertising on Facebook, for instance, how much has been billed that is attributable to that original source.
In the case of my clinic, apparently Google is the way to go.
There you go. Yeah, spot on. So it just allows that sort of closing the loop on depending on how your practice operates and where those either referrals come from or where people come in directly from the public that don't go via a referral. This sort of allows you to sort of track that and get reports on the actual dollar value of the patients that come through from the various sources.
Which is valuable because then you know where to invest, right?
Exactly. We will jump through to the very last and finish up on
it. So I think I'll stop my screen share.
Exactly.
I'll let you drive that back.
Yes. So really, we've gone through and given a very quick overview, about
very brief, yeah.
But the idea being just to sort of, I guess, let people know, what is available, and we're here to help. So if this is interest and you're having a bit of a play and you're not sure about something, of course, we've got the knowledge base people can jump on. But we also have live chat and we have our ticketing system. There's a bunch of ways to reach out to us.
Exactly.
We've got 7 day a week, 24/7, coverage. So jump on whatever time you're looking at it. We're there to help, and it's good. The data, one of the benefits of having a practice management system that is really to allow you to sort of understand what's happening in your practice, get that data out, and use it to make intelligent sort of evidence-based decisions based on actual data rather than gut feel. So thank you very much.
That's it. Thank you very much. And I think the only thing I'd finish on is just if you get stuck at all, obviously reach out. But if you remember, if everything else was a bit much and you just want to remember 3 key things, remember grouping your columns, filtering by columns, and then being able to choose your columns. If you do that and you fiddle around with any report, you'll quickly find your way. If you just remember you've got those tools at your disposal.
Very good tips. Thank you very much. Right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for putting up with my camera.
Thank you so much. You did well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.